You think you know weird atmospheres in Star Wars? Think sandstorms on Tatooine are intense or the toxic clouds of Mustafar are dangerous? We're ranking 10 Star Wars planets by atmospheric weirdness, and I guarantee some of these will blow your mind. Here's the thing most fans don't realize. The galaxy far, far away contains planets with atmospheres so bizarre they make Hoth's ice storms look like a pleasant spring day. However, what's truly fascinating is that many of these atmospheric nightmares aren't just background details. They've shaped entire civilizations, determined the outcomes of major battles, and created life forms that shouldn't exist according to our understanding of physics. We're diving deep into atmospheric chaos that makes Earth's worst weather look adorable, revealing secrets that even hardcore fans might have missed. Let's kick things off with a planet that doesn't get enough credit for its atmospheric chaos, Rodia. Most fans know this as the swampy homeworld of Greedo and the Rodians, but here's what makes it genuinely weird. Rodia's atmosphere is so thick with humidity that it creates a perpetual greenhouse effect, maintaining temperatures that would cook most species alive. We're talking about humidity levels hovering around 95% constantly. The Rodians evolved in this soup-thick air, developing those massive eyes specifically to see through the dense atmospheric moisture. But canon tries to downplay something significant: the Rodians' extreme dependence on their homeworld's specific atmospheric composition. In some legend sources, this dependency was so severe that Rodians experienced discomfort and health issues when breathing standard atmospheres for extended periods. When Rodians traveled off-world, many experienced what they described as air sickness, mild physiological symptoms until their systems adjusted to different atmospheric compositions. This explains why Rodian colonies always tried to replicate their homeworld's atmospheric conditions, even when it was energy-intensive and impractical. Some legends sources suggest the Empire studied this atmospheric dependency to better control Rodian populations and limit their ability to establish independent colonies. The atmospheric density also created bizarre weather patterns. Rainstorms on Rodia didn't fall so much as they hung in the air, creating walls of water that drift across the landscape. The Rodians developed their cities with specialized ventilation systems that could process this waterlogged air. During the Clone Wars, Republic forces learned the hard way that standard atmospheric fighters couldn't operate effectively in Rodia's dense air. The atmosphere was thick enough to significantly slow projectiles, making long-range combat nearly impossible. The real fascination with Rodia lies in how this atmospheric weirdness shaped Rodian culture. Their language evolved with clicking sounds that cut through humid air better than standard vocalizations. Their architecture featured organic curves because sharp angles created turbulence in a thick atmosphere. Even Rodian cuisine developed around foods that could withstand being perpetually damp. But wait until you see what's coming next, because the atmospheric horror is just getting started. Bespin is where things get properly weird, and I'm not just talking about Lando's fashion choices. This gas giant has no solid surface whatsoever, just thousands of kilometers of compressed gases layered like the world's deadliest cake. Cloud City floats in the only habitable zone, a narrow band called the Life Zone, where pressure and temperature happen to be survivable for humanoids. Above it, frozen gases cold enough to shatter metal. Below it, pressures that would crush a Star Destroyer into a cube. The mind-blowing detail: Bespin's atmosphere is actively mining itself. The Tibanna gas that everyone's fighting over only exists in specific atmospheric layers, and it's constantly cycling through the planet's atmospheric currents. The gas refineries aren't just extracting Tibanna, they're interrupting a natural atmospheric process billions of years old. Some scientists in Legends lore theorized that extensive Tibanna mining could destabilize Bespin's entire atmospheric structure. The Empire didn't care, obviously, but it raises interesting questions about atmospheric strip mining. The atmospheric conditions create phenomena that shouldn't exist. Bespin has life zones at different altitudes, each with completely different atmospheric pressures and compositions. Velkers and Beldons float in the lower atmosphere, creatures the size of Star Destroyers that filter feed on Tibanna gas. They're essentially living balloons that evolved in pressures that would kill humans instantly. When Cloud City first arrived, these creatures occasionally floated up into the habitable zone, causing panic until residents realized they were harmless filter feeders. What the Empire didn't want you to know? In Legends, there were rumors that the Beldons were actually semi-sentient and were harvesting Tibanna for their own purposes before humans arrived. Some xenobiologists theorized the Beldons were maintaining atmospheric balance deliberately, and human mining operations were disrupting an ecosystem we didn't understand. The Empire suppressed these reports because acknowledging Beldon's sentience would have complicated mining rights. You're not ready for the toxic nightmare that's coming up in just a moment. Mustafar's atmosphere is basically weaponized geology. This isn't just a hot planet, it's a planet actively trying to kill everything on its surface through atmospheric violence. The atmosphere contains vaporized metals, sulfur compounds, and ash particles that turn every breath into a potential death sentence. The lava flows constantly vent gases that would be considered war crimes if you released them on a battlefield. We're talking about sulfur dioxide concentrations that can blind you, hydrogen sulfide that attacks your nervous system, and temperatures that can melt your lungs. The truly bizarre aspect of Mustafar is that it shouldn't have a breathable atmosphere at all based on its geological violence, but it does, barely, in specific locations. The ancient mining facilities built atmospheric processors to create pockets of survivable air, and somehow these systems are still functioning thousands of years later. The Separatists took advantage when they built their facilities there. Vader's fortress later incorporated Sith alchemy to maintain its atmospheric bubble, fusing technology with darkside energy to keep the air breathable, which is nightmare fuel if you think about it too long. Canon soft pedals a disturbing truth. Mustafar used to be a lush, beautiful planet before a cataclysmic event transformed it. In legend, it was revealed that ancient Sith Lords deliberately engineered Mustafar's atmospheric catastrophe through darkside rituals. They wanted to create a planet saturated with suffering and pain to amplify their power. The volcanic eruptions and toxic atmosphere aren't natural geological processes. They're the ongoing consequence of Sith alchemy performed millennia ago. Every breath of Mustafar's air carries traces of darkside corruption. The atmospheric conditions also create bizarre optical effects. The heat shimmer and particulate matter bend light in ways that make distance perception nearly impossible. During Obi-Wan and Anakin's duel, the atmospheric distortion meant neither fighter could accurately judge distances beyond about 20 meters. The lava flows superheat the air above them, creating updrifts that can flip small spacecraft. Mustafar's atmosphere is essentially a force multiplier for the dark side, amplifying anger and aggression in anyone who breathes it for too long. Get ready for a planet where breathing actually recharges you, which sounds great until you learn the details. Polis Massa completely breaks conventional atmospheric rules. It doesn't have an atmosphere, at all. It's an asteroid colony in what used to be a planet before something catastrophically destroyed it. The Polis Massans, those creepy little medical specialists who delivered Luke and Leia, live in artificial habitats carved into asteroid fragments. But here's where it gets weird. The asteroid field itself has atmospheric pockets. When the planet exploded, some theories suggest superweapons. Pockets of atmosphere got trapped in massive asteroid cavities. These atmospheric bubbles are completely isolated from each other, creating hundreds of mini ecosystems floating through space. Some contain breathable air, others are toxic soup, and a few have atmospheres that defy known physics. Scientists have found atmospheric pockets containing gases that should have dissipated into space millions of years ago, but something is mysteriously keeping them contained. What the Polis Massans don't advertise is what they're really searching for in these asteroids. Officially, they're archaeologists looking for clues about their extinct civilization. Unofficially, Legends lore suggests they're searching for atmospheric samples from their original planet before its destruction. They believe their ancestors evolved in a unique atmospheric composition that gave them specific biological advantages. If they can recreate that original atmosphere, they might be able to reverse their species' declining birth rates and biological degradation. The medical facilities where Padme gave birth utilized a hybrid atmospheric system, combining several different asteroid pocket atmospheres. The Polis Massans discovered that mixing these isolated atmospheric samples created beneficial health effects, essentially creating a healing atmosphere from planetary ruins. This knowledge was highly classified because it implied atmosphere could be weaponized or used for biological enhancement. The Empire later tried to claim Polis Massa specifically to study these atmospheric pockets for military applications, but nothing compares to the atmospheric insanity waiting at number 6, where the air itself is a weapon. Quarzite is where atmospheric pressure becomes the main character. This planet has an atmosphere so dense and pressurized that it creates a hard shell above the surface, like the galaxy's worst snow globe. The atmospheric pressure at sea level is roughly equivalent to being a kilometer underwater on Earth. Humans can't survive on the surface without specialized pressure suits, and even then, the atmospheric compression creates bizarre physical effects. The Cage Warriors, Quarzite's native species, evolved in this crushing atmospheric pressure. Their bodies are incredibly dense and resilient compared to humans. When Cage Warriors travel off-world, they experience Earth's normal atmospheric pressure the way humans would experience a vacuum. They need compression suits to prevent their bodies from expanding dangerously. This creates an interesting defense mechanism. Quarzite is almost invasion-proof because the atmospheric pressure crushes most ground forces before they can establish a foothold. This gets uncomfortable when you realize the dense atmosphere creates what's essentially a pressure-based caste system on Quarzite. The deeper you live in the planet's canyons, the higher the atmospheric pressure, and the more status you have in caged society. The royal family lives at the absolute bottom of the deepest canyon, where atmospheric pressure is so intense that even other cage need time to acclimate. Critics have called this geological discrimination, but cage culture sees it as natural selection. The atmospheric density also creates bizarre weather phenomena. Quarzite doesn't have wind in the traditional sense because the air is too heavy to circulate quickly. Instead, atmospheric currents move like slow-motion tidal waves, creating pressure fronts that can be predicted days in advance. Rain doesn't fall on Quarzite, it compresses into the atmosphere and becomes part of the pressure shell. The whole atmospheric system recycles itself without traditional weather patterns, creating what scientists call a self-contained atmospheric pressure cooker. You won't believe what's next: a planet where time itself moves differently because of atmospheric composition. Chorios has an atmosphere that's actively alive and hostile. This planet is infected with microscopic crystalline organisms called droch that float in the atmosphere and feed on living force energy. The atmosphere itself is a biological weapon that can drain your life force just by breathing. The droch are so prevalent in the atmosphere that anyone staying on Chorios too long becomes a host for millions of these parasitic crystals. The genuinely terrifying reality is that the droch evolved a symbiotic relationship with larger crystal formations called sills that also live in the atmosphere. The sills naturally counteract the droch's life-draining effects, creating an atmospheric balance. But here's the thing: removing either species would collapse the entire atmospheric ecosystem. The planet naturally maintains its own biological quarantine because anyone infected with droch who leaves the planet dies without the sills to counterbalance them. The dark truth? The Old Republic deliberately weaponized Chorios' atmosphere. They exiled dangerous criminals and force-sensitive threats to the planet, knowing the atmospheric organisms would drain their powers and keep them contained. It was marketed as a humanitarian alternative to execution, but really it was a living prison where the atmosphere itself was the guard. Some prisoners lasted decades, slowly being drained by atmospheric parasites, unable to escape because leaving the planet meant death. The droch also create bizarre atmospheric phenomena. They're photosensitive, so the atmosphere literally shifts its composition between day and night as the droch migrate. During Chorios' long nights, the atmospheric droch concentration increases dramatically, making nighttime exponentially more dangerous. The sills grow faintly, creating an eerie bioluminescent haze in the atmosphere after dark. Force-sensitive individuals report that Chorios' atmosphere feels hungry, actively pulling at their connection to the Force. The atmosphere is less a passive environmental feature and more a predatory ecosystem. The next planet makes breathing an extreme sport, and that's not an exaggeration. Felucia's atmosphere is basically hallucinogenic soup with aggressive plant life mixed in for flavor. The air is so saturated with fungal spores that every breath you take includes thousands of microorganisms trying to colonize your lungs. The atmospheric spore count is so high that visibility is perpetually reduced, creating a dreamy, hazy environment that looks beautiful until you realize you're breathing in an alien ecosystem. The fungal spores in Felucia's atmosphere have mild psychoactive properties. Prolonged exposure causes visual and auditory hallucinations, mood alterations, and in some cases, temporary force sensitivity in non-force sensitive individuals. Clone troopers deployed to Felucia during the Clone Wars had to take regular anti-hallucinogenic medication just to maintain combat effectiveness. The Gossam colonists who inhabited Felucia before the Clone Wars built specialized atmospheric filters into all their structures, specifically to avoid chronic spore poisoning. Now for the part that explains why the Jedi were so interested in Felucia. The atmospheric spores amplify force connection. Force-sensitive individuals breathing Felucia's natural atmosphere experience heightened awareness and stronger force abilities, but with significant risks. The spores can create force hallucinations so vivid that Jedi can't distinguish them from reality. Some theorize that Felucia's atmosphere is why the planet became such a significant battleground. The Jedi Council wanted to study how atmospheric conditions could enhance force abilities. The native life on Felucia evolved specifically to exploit the spore-saturated atmosphere. The giant acre dogs hunt by releasing pheromones that mix with atmospheric spores, creating airborne tracking systems. The Gelagrubs emit spores that paralyze prey through atmospheric dispersal. Even the plant life releases specialized spores that attract specific pollinators while repelling predators, all through atmospheric chemistry. The atmosphere isn't just the environment, it's the medium through which the entire ecosystem communicates and competes. Just when you thought atmospheric weirdness peaked, wait until you see where we're going next. Iego wins the award for most deceptively beautiful nightmare atmosphere. Known as the Planet of 1,000 Moons, Iego orbits a system with genuinely bizarre atmospheric interactions between the planet and its natural satellites. But here's the thing nobody talks about. Iego's atmosphere is trapped in a gravitational tug-of-war between all those moons, creating atmospheric tides that can shift breathable air away from entire regions without warning. The atmospheric tides mean that settlements on Iego can suddenly find themselves in a vacuum as the atmosphere literally gets pulled away by lunar gravity. The native angels, called diathym, evolved the ability to survive these atmospheric fluctuations by generating personal atmospheric fields through unknown biological processes. They can exist in hard vacuum or breathable atmosphere interchangeably. When you see a diathym glowing, that's not just aesthetic, it's a visible atmospheric field they're generating to survive Iego's chaotic environment. The uncomfortable reality? Iego's atmosphere is actually a gravitational prison. The system's complex gravitational interactions create what's essentially an atmospheric maze. Ships can enter Iego's atmosphere, but navigating the shifting atmospheric tides to leave requires incredible piloting skill or navigational computers that can detect gravitational atmospheric shifts. Many pilots who visited Iego during the Clone Wars era became trapped, unable to calculate safe exit vectors through the atmospheric tidal patterns. The Separatists exploited this during the Clone Wars by deploying laser web emitters that interacted with Iego's atmospheric tides. The laser web would shift with the atmosphere, creating an unpredictable defense grid that was nearly impossible to navigate. Anakin Skywalker managed to escape by essentially surfing an atmospheric tide, using the lunar gravity to pull his ship through gaps in the defense grid. The whole experience traumatized Ahsoka because Iego's atmospheric weirdness made conventional escape impossible. But we're saving the absolute most insane atmospheric conditions for the final two planets that defy belief. Ziost deserves more recognition for having one of the most malevolent atmospheres in Star Wars history. This ancient Sith world has an atmosphere permanently corrupted by thousands of years of darkside rituals and force manipulation. The air itself carries an oppressive weight that has nothing to do with atmospheric pressure and everything to do with concentrated darkside energy. Breathing Ziost's atmosphere means inhaling air that has been saturated with Sith alchemy and dark force energy for millennia. The atmospheric corruption manifests in physical ways that seem impossible. Moisture in the atmosphere occasionally crystallizes into fragments that contain captured screams from ancient Sith rituals. Wind patterns follow geometries that match Sith spell formations rather than natural meteorological processes. The atmosphere conducts darkside energy so efficiently that Sith Lords practicing on Ziost experienced exponentially amplified powers. It's like the planet's atmosphere is a giant darkside amplifier built through atmospheric manipulation over generations. The disturbing revelation from Legends lore: Ziost's atmosphere may actually be sentient, or at least semi-sentient. Ancient Sith holocrons reference the breath of Ziost as a conscious entity that could be bargained with for power. Some Sith Lords performed rituals specifically to merge their consciousness with the planet's atmosphere upon death, essentially becoming part of the air itself. This means that breathing on Ziost might expose you to fragmented consciousness from dead Sith Lords floating in gaseous form. The atmospheric conditions also preserved Sith artifacts in ways that defy normal physics. Objects left in Ziost's atmosphere for extended periods became saturated with darkside energy, essentially turning regular materials into darkside relics through atmospheric exposure alone. After Vitiate consumed all life on Ziost during the Old Republic era, the atmosphere became even more toxic, carrying traces of billions of consumed life forces. The Empire Reborn and later galactic governments classified Ziost as an atmospheric hazard zone, but the real reason was fear that the atmosphere itself could corrupt entire populations. Still, Ziost isn't number one, because the most bizarre atmospheric nightmare in Star Wars is something else entirely. Taking the top spot is Umbara, the Shadow World, which has the most fundamentally weird atmosphere in all of Star Wars. Umbara's atmosphere blocks 99% of its sun's light, despite being relatively thin. The atmospheric composition includes particles that specifically absorb visible light wavelengths while allowing ultraviolet light through. This creates a perpetual twilight environment where darkness is the default state, and traditional vision is nearly useless. The insane reality is that Umbara's atmosphere shouldn't support life at all based on conventional biology. The lack of visible light should prevent photosynthesis, but Umbaran plant life photosynthesize using ultraviolet light instead. Everything on Umbara, plants, animals, and sentient Umbarans, evolved to see in ultraviolet spectrums that are invisible to most species. The Clone Wars campaign on Umbara was a nightmare specifically because clone troopers were fighting in an atmosphere that made their visual perception worthless. Something that explains Umbaran psychology. Growing up in this light-absorbing atmosphere fundamentally altered how Umbarans process reality. They see in spectrums invisible to others. They experience darkness as baseline normal rather than an absence of light, and their atmospheric composition creates natural stealth for their technology. Some xenopsychologists theorized that the Umbarans' famous duplicity and manipulation tactics stem from evolving in an atmosphere where nothing is visually what it appears to be. Their culture's emphasis on deception mirrors their atmospheric reality. The military implications are staggering. Umbaran technology works specifically with their atmosphere's light absorption properties. Their starfighters use atmospheric particles as natural stealth coating. Their weapons fire projectiles that are nearly invisible in standard visual spectrums. During the Clone Wars, Republic forces faced enemies they literally couldn't see operating in an atmosphere designed to hide them. General Krell exploited this by turning clones against each other in atmospheric conditions where friend or foe identification became impossible. But here's the most disturbing fact: Umbara's atmosphere is slowly spreading. Atmospheric analysis shows that Umbara is venting its light-absorbing particles into nearby space, creating an expanding shadow region around the planet. Some scientists warn that unchecked, Umbara's atmosphere could eventually darken its entire star system. Whether this is natural atmospheric expansion or deliberate Umbaran atmospheric engineering remains classified, but imagine an atmosphere so aggressive, it's trying to convert neighboring planets to permanent darkness. So there you have it, 10 Star Wars planets ranked by atmospheric weirdness, from Rodia's humidity prison to Umbara's light-eating nightmare. We've covered atmospheres that drain your life force, atmospheres that make you hallucinate, and those that literally tried to become conscious darkside entities. If you enjoyed this deep dive into atmospheric chaos, click the link in the description to check out our previous video where we explore another fascinating aspect of the Star Wars galaxy you'd never considered before. And if you want more deep lore explorations like this, more facts that even hardcore fans miss, and more controversial Star Wars information that canon tries to ignore, hit that subscribe button right now. We're building a community of fans who want to go beyond surface level Star Wars knowledge, who want the weird details, the disturbing implications, and the atmospheric nightmares that make this galaxy truly alien. Subscribe and join us as we continue exploring the parts of Star Wars that most channels ignore. Thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you, assuming your planet's atmosphere doesn't drain it away first.